Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my Rome ePrix power rankings, or basically my power rankings I do after each Formula E round. So of course with these power rankings I take a look at how I feel each driver has done in the most recent 3 or 4 races. So starting at number 22, a driver that has not impressed me particularly much, especially in qualifying, is Roberto Meri. He's been well over a second off the pace of some of the other drivers in qualifying, so he'll be like almost 2 seconds off, whole time from the group stages. So I think he really needs to be doing better in qualifying. And the races, he's been very anonymous, which I don't really blame him. The Mahindra's a really terrible car. That being said, in qualifying, there isn't really much excuse for being that far off. Number 21, dropping 1 position, is Andre Lauter. Now for Lauter, his teammate's the heavy favorite for the title, and he's struggling to get points. It's pretty clear. He's been underperforming pretty much consistently all year, and he just hasn't clicked with the Formula E Gen 3 car. I do think, unfortunately for him, he's probably coming to, his time in Formula E is coming to an end. Which is a shame because I really liked some of his performances in end of Gen 1 and beginning of Gen 2. Number 20, moving down 1 position, is Rene Rast. For Rast, a bit of a tricky weekend. He DNF'd from 1 race after contact with Jake Dennis. Breaking his front wing was a bit of a clumsy move there. And the second race, he was just kind of lacking in pace. And the car didn't really have the pace while the works team, the Nissan, was on the podium. So pretty tough weekend there for Rast, and similar fortunes for his teammate, Jake Hughes, who I've also dropped 1 spot to 19th. For Hughes, I think he's going to be really disappointed about missing the opportunity to participate in the first race in Rome. There was a lot of good points on offer, given that the Apt finished 6th in that race. And given the melee and all the chaos involved with that race, there was a lot of good points on offer. And again, I think making that mistake and crashing that heavily in qualifying, unfortunately, I think did have pretty significant consequences. Number 18, a driver who had a bit of a better first race in Rome and then kind of a more usual, more meh second race, was Sergio Sette Camara, who had moved up 3 positions. Finishing 9th in Rome was a really good result. He kept the car on the track, kept it between the walls, and he picked up some good points for the Neo team. Second race was a bit more of what we've come to expect this year. A bit off the pace in both qualifying and the race compared to Tictum, but nonetheless, the first race was very good. Number 17, a driver who moves down 5 positions, is Sasha Fenestraz. So for Fenestraz, the first race, he was in a really good position after the big crash, the big incident. But that being said, I think he just mismanaged the energy a little bit and used a bit too much energy after that, after the restart. He ended up dropping through the field and he finished in 10th. Second race though, the car had some kind of issue through FP3 and the qualifying, so he was not able to participate in qualifying. So I don't really put it on him too much. For that being said, I think he will be ruining the lack of results from that first race. And of course, the fact that his teammate got the team's first podium the second race doesn't help either. Number 16, driver only moving up 1 position, and you might be able to justify moving him up more, but that's Sam Bird. For Bird, of course, he had that big massive crash the first race in Rome that caused 6 other cars to DNF. Very costly accident, both financially and in terms of the championship. I believe he was in 5th, and it made really kind of sunk any championships hopes for the Jaguar team for winning that team's championship. The second race was a bit better, did get a podium, but that being said, I do think that the Jaguar had the pace to win that race. So it was a bit disappointing that he was not able to get above 3rd place. Number 15, driver who had a really torrid weekend, moving down 8 spots, and this is one of kind of 3 drivers who's moving down a lot of spots. And I had to kind of go over it a lot in my head, but if I was like, fine, there's it was a double header, so it's fine to move him down more. But that's Lucas Degrassi. Crashed in the first race, obviously got caught up in that big melee, not really his fault. Second race kind of was a bit aggressive in that wheel-to-wheel battle with Verline, which caused him to then be basically put into the wall and eventually retired from the race. But that being said, I don't really expect a whole lot from him. But that being said, 2 DNF, double DNF from Rome is not what he was looking for. Let's see, where are we? Number 14, moving up 3 positions, is Edo Mortara. Really good result. The second race, finishing in 4th place to lead Maserati car. So a really good result for him and for the team. First race, of course, got caught up in that big crash. I'm not really sure what happened. He was the car that had the biggest impact with Bird. There were some other cars that hit Bird as well, but he did have the biggest impact with Bird. I don't know if he was just unsighted. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's possible he was completely unsighted and he couldn't really avoid the accident any more than he did. So that being said, still a good weekend for him overall as a whole, getting that 4th place. So he does move up 3 positions. Number 13, moving down 8 positions, a driver who had a really rough weekend, I thought, is Antonio Felix da Costa, moving down 8 spots. For da Costa, first race, one of the drivers caught up in that Bird melee, so I don't really need to say more than that. Second race, he was in a decent position to possibly get some points, but went down the escape road at turn 7, made that mistake, and kind of lost out on a good chunk of points there. So a bit of a costly mistake for him, so I've moved him down 8 spots. And that's more of a result of a lot of other drivers as thought who were below him last time out, who've moved up and moved up above him. Number 12, driver moving up 3 positions. Really good result for them. For him is Norman Nato. So the first race was a bit of a struggle with the Nissan, but the second race, of course, got that really good podium, got an excellent haul of points, and moved himself up well up into the championship. So I was honestly very surprised. The second race, I was not expecting him to get that good of a result. The first race was a bit of a struggle, and this year he's been a bit all over the place. And this was kind of how I felt about him in his first year in Formula E. He was generally very meh throughout, but then once in a while he would have an absolutely amazing result, and he's just a bit too inconsistent, I think. I do believe he has a contract though for next year, so we probably will be back for next year. But I do think he's going to want to up his game, especially work on his consistency going forward. Number 11, also moving up 3 positions, is Nico Müller. So for Müller, really excellent result, basically double points finish in the apt car. I know the first race, there was a lot of drivers who DNF'd, so we benefited massively from that, but still finishing 6th place was an absolutely massive result. Second race, finishing 10th with way less DNFs was also a really good result. That being said, I do feel like there was drivers ahead of him who also had a really excellent result, and if he's able to repeat this kind of level of performance as well, I think he'll be moving up again for my final power rankings of the season. Number 10. A decent race for this driver, but that being said, I do think you could justify having Müller ahead of Van Dorn. For Van Dorn, first race was a bit of a struggle. I think got damage, had to start from the back after the restart, after the red flag. But the second race, he was able to get some points, which is good for the team. The team's really, I think, around Hyderabad, around India, they were looking like the 4th or 5th fastest car on the grid, and I really feel like they've been passed both by the Maserati team, their own customer team, and Nissan and McLaren have basically been there or thereabouts with them for the second half of the season. So they really seem to have dropped the ball. So that being said, really disappointing championship defense for Van Dorn. Some of it's on him, but a lot of it's on the car. Let's see, number 9, moving up 2 positions, is Dan Ticktum. So for Ticktum, first race, I think he was really unfortunate not to get points. Was looking to be in a really good position. I believe he was in 6th and 7th or 7th, but then was kind of taken out by a driver behind him. I can't remember who it was actually. I might have been Müller actually. It might have been Nico Müller. but he was taken out and had damage to the car, so he was forced to retire, which is really unfortunate for him. I think it could have been on for a really good haul of points. Second race though, he looked really good, made it into the quarterfinals of the duels, and then from there, I think had the best race he could have and managed to keep it in 9th place. Let's see, number 8, dropping 2 positions, is Robin Frines. So for Frines, a bit of an anonymous weekend. First race got caught up in the bird melee. Not a whole lot he could have done there. I think a bit unfortunate that he was caught up in that and his teammate managed to survive and get those really good points. Second race, I'm not really sure what happened. He DNF'd from the race, but because he was so far back for most of the race, we didn't really get to see what happened to him. But that being said, last time out, Muller did look quite a bit better than him. So I think for the last race, if that continues, Muller will be ahead of Frines. Number 7, moving up 2 positions despite their championship effectively ending, is Pascal Wehrlein. So I think given the circumstances of how he got those points finishes, I do think he had a bit of a decent weekend. First race, got that front wing damage on the opening lap. Not really his fault. There was lots of just tapping and contact through those opening laps. Was sent to the back, which is kind of a blessing because then when that bird crash happened, he was basically back with a chance of getting really good points. And he finished 7th in that race. The second race, I think he also finished 7th, recovered from a bit of a tricky qualifying. But that being said, his championship's pretty much over. But I think looking at the context of how he got those points, especially the first race, I do think he did have a good weekend. Number 6, moving up 5 positions, is Sebastian Buemi. First race, not really a whole lot to add. Was taken out by the bird crash. Second race though, got some really good points for the team, I believe in 5th place, which was a really good result for him and for the team, especially since they crashed out of the race prior. That being said, I think his goal for the last couple of races is just to help his team Envision win the team's championship and try, if possible, to help Cassidy win the driver's championship. But at this point, that's really a long shot. Number 5, moving up 3 positions, and actually the reason I had to retake this video because I realized I forgot about his result in the first opening race of the weekend, and that was Jean-Eric Vergne. Survived all the chaos with the bird crash, finishing in 5th place, which given where that DS Penske car is right now, I think is a really good result. I know it's probably not what he would be hoping for. He would be hoping for consistent wins and podiums, but the car is really not there, and he's been much better overall than his teammate Stoffel Vandoorne this year. Second race, he had contact front wing damage, had to pit for that, and his race was basically over there, but that being said, it was pretty innocuous, so I'm not really putting too much blame on him for that. Number 4. So this is kind of where it gets a bit tricky. First race, pole, win, fastest lap, absolutely amazing performance. Second race, crashes into his championship rival on the second lap of the race, taking both of them out and basically destroying both of their championships hopes. And I do think that, on the whole, given how many drivers in the 5 to about 10 range before this race had pretty off weekends, like drivers like DaCosta, Frines, DeGrassi, they all had off races, I thought. So because of that, and I think a bunch of other drivers had already moved up, I decided to keep them in the same spot. And of course, I'm talking about Mitch Evans. So I think really a weekend of 2 halves. Excellent first race, absolutely awful second race. That accident was on him. It was his mistake. And I believe he's been given a 5-point grid penalty for the London race, first race in London, which I think is justified. That being said, the speed's there. That the first race showed that. He really capitalized that. I think he'll be extremely disappointed by how the second race went. His hopes were a long shot at best, but they've basically been reduced to very, very little at this point. Number 3, moving down 1 position, still pretty good result for him overall in Rome, and that's Max Günther. 3rd place the first race, and I think 6th place the second race. So overall, really good result. Managed to beat out Jake Dennis for that podium the first race, which I thought was quite impressive. Second race was behind his teammate, but that being said, overall, the second half of the season, he's been one of the best performers. And I bet if you basically started the season from the second half of the season onwards, Gunther would have been in contention for the championship. Yeah, that's how consistent his results have been. Now going into the top two, moving up one position, is Nick Cassidy. First race, second place, really good result for him. Second race, of course, was taken out by Evans. I don't put any blame on Cassidy for that. I thought, had a really good result. But at the same time, I do feel like qualifying has been holding him back a little. The first race, if he had qualified in up a little bit higher, I do think he could have had a chance of beating Evans for the win. But it's something that we've kind of seen for several races this year, where he's not qualifying in the duels, and he's basically able to make his way up to the podium. Sometimes it's worked and he's able to win the race, but more often than not, those are the races where it's the really crazy Peloton style races where no one wants to lead, and he's been fortunate that it's been those races that he's able to make that jump through the field. But for races where we haven't had that, where there's been less laps, he's really been struggling to make up that deficit from qualifying. His energy management's been really good. The qualifying, I think, needs to be a little better. And of course, it was really unfortunate. The second race, where he had the really good qualifying, he was then taken out by Evans. So we didn't really get to see what would happen if we saw Cassidy leading from the front to start the race. So number one, of course, most points from the weekend overall, and that is Jake Dennis. Got fourth place first race, a bit of a disappointment. I do put a little bit of that on the team, who seemed to have mismanaged the strategy and calculating how many laps were left. But that being said, same boat as Fenestraz, but still managed to bring it home in fourth place, which isn't really a bad result at the end of the day. Second race, though, was absolutely fantastic. Managed at lights to flag. Was very lucky to avoid being caught up in the Cassidy-Evans crash, and if all three of them had been caught up in that crash, the championship would look very, very different, and we'd be having a very different conversation going into the last two races. But that being said, he was overall probably the best driver in Rome, and I think has been the best driver for the last month and a half or so, last 2 months or so. Well, given how spread out Formula E races tend to be. So that's all for my power rankings for the Rome ePrix. Only one more power rankings left this year, and that will be, of course, after the London ePrix in 2 weeks' time. So thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.